It is Tuesday, the 20th of August, 2024. My name is Pigeon Rose, and this is my song of the day. So, 2 weeks ago, I talked about Ahead by a Century by the Tragically Hip. I talked about how their lead singer, Gord Downie, died of cancer. Before he did so, they did a big farewell tour, and their final concert was broadcast across Canada, and it was a whole big event. And I mentioned in that episode that the anniversary of that concert was actually coming up soon, and so I may do a different Tragically Hip song on that day. And that day is today, the 20th of August. So today we are talking about the Tragically Hip song, Nautical Disaster. Now, I talked about this in the Ahead by a Century episode, so I'll just give you the abridged version now, but this is the song I discovered the band through. Pigeon from the comedy group Loading Ready Run referenced this song in a video, in a live stream specifically, and I was curious, so I looked it up, loved the song, listened to the whole album, loved the album, and that's how I got into the Tragically Hip. So this song has a special place in my heart. I mean, it's a fan favorite anyway, it's one of their biggest songs really, but it has a special place in my heart specifically because it's the song I discovered them through, and a lot of times when listening to it or thinking about the song, I will picture Cam singing it or speaking it, especially because Beej then said, "We miss you, Gord," and we do. I know I am but a humble Irish person, not a Canadian, but I am pretty sad that I didn't get into this band until after Gord had died, unfortunately. Not that I think I would have been able to get over to Canada to see. Well, I suppose if I'd already been a fan and they were doing a big farewell tour, I might have made the trip. Anyway, sounds like a lot of shoulda, woulda, coulda. So, we are going to listen to the song now and then come back in a few minutes and talk about it. God, I love that fucking song so much. It's just one of those songs that will pop into my head and I'll just sing it to myself, start to finish. So fucking good. I remember when I first discovered it, I was just listening to it and repeat all the time. This is one of the two songs they performed on Saturday Night Live. Dan Aykroyd was previously a regular on Saturday Night Live, and he's from Ottawa, Canada himself, and he was a fan of the band, so even though he wasn't on Saturday Night Live anymore in 1995, he specifically suggested them to perform on Saturday Night Live to Lorne Michaels, and was the one to introduce them, which is great. And that probably would have been a lot of Americans' exposure to them because, as I mentioned in the previous episode, they were mostly just known in Canada throughout their career. And that was 1995, a year before 1996, which is when Trouble at the Hen House came out, which is the album that Ahead by a Century was on, which was their biggest hit, which is the song I talked about last time. Anyway, we're here to talk about Nautical Disaster. So this song, first of all, I love the mood of it because it's about a nautical disaster. It's about a ship sinking and various people dying in the water, except for the narrator, obviously. But the music feels like a nautical disaster. This might be affected by the music video a bit. The opening sounds like uneasy waters. There's something watery about it. I don't know how to describe it, but it just feels like you're floating along. And then when the drum comes in off the coast of France, dear, and then shit starts going down, basically. It really does just feel like the whole song is representing the sinking, and then the end when it fades back out again, it's still there, it's still lingering, it still feels like you're floating out to sea, you know what I mean? I really think the music complements the mood of it so well. Also a great guitar solo in the middle there. But anyway, let's go through the lyrics. I had this dream where I relished the fray, and the screaming filled my head all day. It was as though I had been spit here, settled into the pocket of a lighthouse on some rocky socket off the coast of France, dear. So, there's been various theories as to what specific nautical disaster this is representing, if any. Gord Downie himself specifically told the authors of the book Have Not Been the Same that it's about the Bismarck. Some of the lyrics don't really match the Bismarck factually, but it can be assumed that Gord at least took inspiration from that sinking, maybe. It doesn't have to be exactly that, and especially because, it's about dreams, so it doesn't have to be accurate anyway, because dreams aren't accurate to real life, So, what I really love about this song is the specificity in the phrasing. Gord Downie was a unique man, and he phrased things uniquely. The lyrics are just full of things that no one would write like that except for Gord. And also, there's a lot of very specific details that I enjoy. So, I had this dream where I relished the fray. It's such a strange way to phrase the idea of recalling this struggle against the water. And the screaming filled my head all day as the rhyme to that really just tells you a lot that this dream stuck with him, that the screaming filled his head all day, right? That it was sticking with him even after he woke up and probably until he went to bed again. It was as though I'd been spit here, settled into the pocket of a lighthouse in some rocky socket off the coast of France here, like he's saying, he enters the dream and suddenly he's washed up on shore, right? And then he jumps back to, one afternoon, 4,000 men died in the water here, and 500 more were thrashing madly as parasites might in your blood. Oh, such specific details. 4,000 men died in the water and 500 more were thrashing madly. There weren't that many people on the Bismarck or the... I should probably specify, the Bismarck was a German naval battleship. It was named after Otto von Bismarck. It was famously involved in a naval battle with some British battleships and was sunk. So the number of 4,500 more doesn't really equal how many people were on the Bismarck and the British battleships that were lost, but it's just to give you the impression that a lot of people died or were affected, right? It doesn't have to be the exact numbers. But yeah, the idea that they were thrashing madly as parasites might in your blood is such a visceral image. It's, ugh. It makes you squirm, Now, I was in a lifeboat designed for 10 and 10 only. Anything that's systematic would get you hated. It's not a deal, not a test, nor a love of something fated. Death. It's so interesting here. He mentions that the lifeboat was designed for only 10 people, and he emphasized that. He says 10 and 10 only. He's kind of implying, like, why would they have a lifeboat on a ship that can hold so many people? 4,000 men died in the water and only 10 people can fit onto this lifeboat. He's calling to attention how cold that is, how uncaring that seems, and he says anything that's systematic would get you hated. Like, why would you? That's just such a bad thing, basically. And then it's not a deal, not a test, nor a love of something fated. He's just talking about how it's just a simple case of bad luck. This wasn't supposed to happen. And then the little death, it's not annotated on Genius, and it's just written in brackets, which is really interesting to me. But yeah, he just says the word death, and it strikes you in a way, because he says it's not a deal, not a test, or a love of something fated. It doesn't say that he just thinks it's bad luck, but that's the implication. And then he just says death. It's like, yeah, no, it was just death. That's just what it was. People died. And that's just the way it crumbles, cookie-wise. That's just the way it crumbles, cookie-wise. The selection was quick, the crew was picked in order, and those left in the water were kicked off our pant leg, and we headed for home. This, again, speaks to that systematic thing, the coldness of it, how they selected who was going to fit in the lifeboat. Everyone else was forced to stay in the water, and even if they tried to get into the lifeboat, they would just kick them off unsympathetically. It really makes me think of the poem After the Titanic by Derek Mahon. I highly recommend it. It's a great poem. It's real fucking sad. It's about J. Bruce Ismay, who was if I remember correctly, he was someone who worked for the White Star Line who made the Titanic, and he survived the sinking and was like ostracized by the public because they viewed him as a coward for not going down with the ship, basically, and he just kind of became a recluse and didn't really do much with the rest of his life. And the poem takes sort of a sympathetic ear to that, talking about how it must have felt for him. That's what this makes me think of here, just the kind of coldness of it all, and people being left behind in the water. It's almost like After the Titanic is trying to appeal to Gord Downey's description of the inhumanity of it all, And then it takes a turn. There's a little pause with it, and we headed for home. The music goes on for a bit, and then suddenly, the dream ends when the phone rings. You're doing all right. He said it's out there most days and nights, but only a fool would complain. Anyway, Susan, if you like, our conversation is as faint a sound in my memory as those fingernails scratching on my hull. Christ. Yeah, so he reminds you that he's talking about a dream this whole time. The dream ends when the phone rings. You're doing all right, he said. It's out there most days and nights, but only a fool would complain. You could interpret this as, like, the person describing this being an actual survivor of the wreck and kind of feeling survivor's guilt. The person saying you're doing all right could be anyone. I viewed it as, like, maybe a therapist or something. Someone tried to reassure him. And I say, it's out there most days and nights, but only a fool would complain. Like, the ship is still out there, but you survived. So why would you complain, right? Is what that feels like to me, But then anyway, Susan, if you like, our conversation is as faint a sound in my memory as this fingernail scratching on my hull. He's revealing that he's telling this whole story to someone else called Susan, perhaps a girlfriend or an ex-girlfriend or something. But he just kind of dismisses the whole thing. He's like, forget about it. If you want, we can forget about this conversation. But he brings it back around because he says, as faint a sound in my memory as this fingernail scratching on my hull, which is such a visceral image. Fingernail scratching on my hull. like he's the Bismarck and the people who drowned are scratching at the inside of him. Whether this is actually a story of survivor's guilt or he's just feeling the powerful survivor's guilt from the situation that the dream has given him, but whatever it is, he is haunted by this dream. And I think it's just so expertly phrased there in that final line, especially the way he sings it, as those fingernails scratching on my hull. You really feel it. And then just guitar solo and fade out to the end. Fuck, I love this song. It's so good. Music video is very good as well. It's mostly the band performing the song, intercut with video of people falling into, jumping into, floating in the water, variously looking alive or drowned. It's just a great video. The SNL performance is also very good. I'm sure there's other performances online. I haven't watched the whole finale concert. I assume they performed it there, but I haven't found timestamps for it, so I don't know. I haven't watched the specific performance, but I'm sure it's good. I really want to. I should just watch that performance. It's all on YouTube. Oh, yes, one more thing. I wrote a short story based on this song, and it's fine. The song's better, but I do want to say how this song has kind of stuck with me the way the dream sticks with the narrator. You know, I think about it a lot, and I think it's really interesting the way it depicts it. Anyway, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say about this one. Thank you so much for listening. Please give me a like, hit subscribe, leave a comment, do all that jazz. Please tell someone else about the show. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you tomorrow.
Break it down.
And then come back in a few minutes and talk about it. And disappointing you is getting me down.